Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, when we talk about Abraham Lincoln, it's easy to just see the monument, isn't it? The 16th president, saved the Union, ended slavery. A giant.
Absolutely. He's rightly seen as this monumental figure.
But the sources we're looking at today, well, they force us to look beneath the statue, down into the real grit of his life. We're talking about a life filled with constant, just crushing defeats, personal, political. That makes you wonder, how did anyone survive that, let alone achieve what he did?
It's a fair question.
So our mission today is a deep dive into that journey, using the source material to trace Lincoln from, literal abject poverty and failure after failure, all the way to the White House. We're trying to understand, really understand, his perseverance.
Exactly. We're tracking a life where it feels like everything was conspiring to break him. And what comes through in the biographies isn't just, he tried hard. It's more like a core belief, a philosophy almost. If you're working for something moral, your effort is never truly wasted. Even if you lose right now, you're not really defeated if you keep trying. That seems to be what fueled him.
Okay, let's dig into that. We need to establish the baseline. Everyone knows the log cabin image, but the sources suggest it was less about humble beginnings and more about radical instability.
Oh, far beyond just humble. He was born February 12, 1809, Harding County, Kentucky. Thomas and Nancy Lincoln. They built their own cabin, yes, but stability, that was completely absent.
And they were forced to move constantly. Like within 2 years, they had to leave because of land disputes.
Right.
Then they moved to Knob Creek Farm. Another dispute happens. And by 1816, they're packing up again, this time heading into dense wilderness in Indiana near the Ohio River. It wasn't just moving. It was being uprooted repeatedly, just struggling to survive, farming, hunting.
And that constant scramble for survival directly impacted his education, or really his lack of it. The biographies say he only attended school for maybe a few days total.
Just a few days.
Yeah. The family just couldn't afford it, and they needed his labor. His father, Thomas, well, the sources describe him as harsh, and he actively discouraged Abraham from reading or studying.
Wow. So his love of learning was actually a source of conflict at home.
It seems so, which makes his self-education even more remarkable, doesn't it?
No.
He taught himself using borrowed books whenever he could find a spare moment, often while working as a laborer just to feed himself from a young age.
And then on top of all that came the first really big personal blow.
Tragedy struck early. His mother, Nancy, died in 1818. Abraham was only 9.
9 years old.
And think about this. The sources note that the running of the household immediately fell to his sister, Sarah. She was just 11.
Incredible burden.
A profound loss. But then something interesting happens. A year later, his father remarries a widow named Sarah Bush Johnston.
She already had children of her own, right?
3 kids. But apparently she saw something special in young Abe. She really took to him.
She seems like the first real source of encouragement he had.
Absolutely. She supported his drive to learn, gave him that emotional support he clearly needed. And the historical consensus is pretty strong now. That famous quote, "All that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother."
Yeah.
It's almost certainly about her, his stepmother, the one who nurtured the spark his own father tried to put out.
So that spark, that drive to learn, eventually pulled him away from farming, didn't it? He learned carpentry, built flatboats.
He had to. Since his father didn't value the studying, he used his hands to make a living, working as a boatman, a farmhand, basically doing physical work so he could carve out time for intellectual work.
A means to an end.
Precisely. And that path eventually led him to a job in a general store. Now, this was key.
Why was the store so important?
Because it finally gave him consistent time to properly study law, all on his own. Remember, he's aiming to be a lawyer without ever going to college.
Which brings us to that amazing story, the one about the icy river. It just shows his incredible dedication. He hears about a retired judge across the river with law books.
Yes, and the accounts say it was a brutal winter. The river was choked with ice, really dangerous.
But he goes anyway.
Launches his boat, it hits ice, breaks apart, and what does he do? He swims across the freezing river to get to the judge's house.
Just unbelievable. Risking his life for books. What happened when he got there? What did the judge say?
Well, the judge was, as you can imagine, pretty impressed, maybe a bit stunned. He agreed to let Lincoln read all his books, but there was a catch. The judge's servant was away on leave, so Lincoln had to pay for access to the books with chores, gathering firewood, fetching water, household tasks.
And Lincoln's reaction?
According to the sources, he was overjoyed with this arrangement. He saw the labor not as a problem, but as the price of knowledge, a price he was more than willing to pay.
He later became a postmaster, too, which helped him build connections, gain some respect, slowly moving into public life.
Right. But then he makes the jump into politics and boom, hits a wall. Hard.
What drove him into politics in the first place?
It seems to have been his deep-seated hatred of slavery. He'd seen its cruelty firsthand, the sources suggest, and felt morally compelled to fight its expansion.
So he runs for the state legislature
Well,
and loses. Badly.
crushing defeat is the term used. And it wasn't just ego-bruising. He'd quit his postmaster job to run.
Oh, no.
So he's left with no job, no political office, and deep in debt. Financially ruined. And then, right on the heels of that, personal tragedy strikes again.
This is when things get really dark, isn't it? He falls in love.
Deeply in love, age 24, with Anne Rutledge, and then suddenly she falls ill and dies.
Just devastating.
The biographies from that time paint a picture of a man completely broken by grief, spending hours, literally hours, weeping at her grave.
So his political dream collapses. He's broke, and the love of his life is gone.
It's an absolutely catastrophic combination: public failure, private devastation, and it sent him into a spiral. We found evidence describing a period of severe depression. They called it melancholy then.
How bad did it get?
So bad that friends worried about him. He apparently started avoiding knives, sharp objects, because he feared he might actually take his own life.
Wow. That's incredibly raw. The man who would later hold the entire country together was, at one point, afraid of himself.
Exactly. It puts his later resilience into terrifying perspective, doesn't it? And this is where friendship becomes critical. Sources credit his friend, Bowling Green, with basically pulling him back from the brink.
Really supporting him through it.
Deep support, helping him find the will to go on. You could argue that surviving that internal battle was essential preparation for the national battle to come. He had to save himself first.
And somehow, with that support, he does pull himself together. He runs again for the state legislature.
And this time, he wins, becomes one of the youngest legislators. He starts building influence, even gets the government to accept his proposal to make Springfield the new state capital.
A real comeback. And this kicks off his legal career properly.
Yes, a 20-year legal career. He gets his license, but here's the fascinating part. He often struggled financially, but it was partly about choice.
By choice. How?
Because of his ethics. The historical accounts are pretty clear. He often didn't charge poor clients. And more than that, he apparently refused to take cases he felt were dishonest.
He valued inner peace over money, even after everything he'd been through. That's remarkable, especially given the poverty and debt.
It seems so. For him, the law was about justice, about purpose. That sense of doing right may be compensated for the lack of financial security. There's that famous story about the mentally ill woman.
Right, tell us that one. It really sums up his integrity.
Okay, so Lincoln and his partner defended a poor woman described as mentally ill, whose land had been basically stolen by someone wealthy and powerful. They won the case quickly, like in 15 minutes.
Right.
The wealthy man paid the legal fee. Lincoln immediately told his partner, "Return my share."
Fine. They won the case.
His reasoning, according to the accounts, was, "I would rather starve than take such money." He said it belonged to the poor, sick woman. It wasn't just charity, it was an absolute moral line. Protecting the vulnerable mattered more than his own finances. You can see the seeds of his later political battles right there.
That kind of integrity, that refusal to compromise, it must have eventually resonated.
It seems it did. It certainly shaped his reputation. Of course, life kept throwing curveballs. He married Mary Todd in 1842. They had 4 sons.
But tragically, only one, Robert, lived to adulthood.
More heartbreak, constant loss. Yet he kept moving forward, applying that hard-won integrity from his law practice to his national political ambitions.
And after all the poverty, the defeats, the losses, the near despair, he runs for president in 1860.
And he wins, becomes the 16th president, just as the country is about to rip itself apart.
An unbelievable climb, which leads us to the peak of his public life, tragically comes short.
His presidency was defined by, arguably, the monumental task, guiding America through the Civil War, an agonizing, bloody conflict.
But his ultimate achievement, the legal embodiment of his lifelong moral stance.
That has to be the 13th Amendment. Pushing it through, getting it ratified, finally abolishing slavery in the entire United States. Taking that hatred of injustice born way back in the Kentucky wilderness and embedding its end into the Constitution itself.
A truly historic act, completed just before his assassination on April 14th, 1865.
A sudden, violent end to an improbable life.
So let's loop back to where we started, this idea of perseverance. We've seen the evidence, the poverty, the constant moves, losing his mother, his fiancée, 3 children, the political failures, that terrifying brush with suicidal despair.
Yeah.
These weren't just bumps in the road. They were, like you said, fires he had to walk through.
And maybe the key insight from the sources is that his success wasn't despite these things, but somehow because of them. That resilience, that moral compass was forged in those fires.
How so?
Well, think about his ability to manage incredibly complex, conflicting viewpoints during the war. Maybe that came directly from his own history of enduring hardship, of sticking to his principles, even when it cost him dearly in his law practice. He understood the price of conviction. He knew how to survive the darkest nights because he'd lived through them personally.
Which leaves us with a really powerful question for you, the listener, to think about. Given Lincoln never really had stability, no permanent home growing up, no formal education, how much did that life of constant motion and self-reliance actually shape his unique ability to lead a nation that was itself falling apart?
And what does it tell us about character? Deep down, that a man who had to be talked out of suicide could then find the strength not just to endure, but to lead the immense political effort needed to save the Union.
Was surviving the Civil War inside himself the key to winning the Civil War outside? Something to mull over this week as you face your own challenges.